So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our March SCITalk. It's the second talk in our 2024 trilogy on artificial intelligence and its applications. Today, we're looking at Bayesian optimization and the design of experiments. Move the slides along. A reminder that all attendees to this webinar are in listen-only mode, but you can join in the conversation at any time during the talk by asking a question via the Zoom question box, and there'll be a Q&A session at the end of the talk. For those who don't know me, I'm Tim Reynolds, and I'm chair of the SEI's Public Evening Lecture Committee, and also current acting chair of the SEI's College of Scholars Committee. But enough about me. Our speaker today is Professor Ruth Misener, who holds the BASF Royal Academy of Engineering Research Chair in Data-Driven Optimisation at Imperial College London in the Department of Computing. Ruth previously held an EPSRC Early Career Fellowship and a Royal Academy of Engineering Research Fellowship at Imperial as well. And the foundations of her research are in numerical optimization, the computational software, and our applications focus on optimization challenges arising in industry, and in particular in chemical and bioprocessing challenges, such as scheduling in manufacturing or experimental research design. Ruth also works at the interface of operations research and machine learning, and she received the 2017 Sir George Macfarlane Medal as the overall winner of the Royal Academy of Engineers Young Engineer of the Year Award. Ruth is from America. She took her first degree in chemical engineering from MIT and then went on to get her PhD again in chemical engineering from Princeton. Today, Ruth will be talking about Bayesian optimization and how she's applying the problems in materials and chemical process research. So over to you, Ruth. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tim, for the kind introduction. And I realized that when I'm asked for a bio, I should give Ruth as a person and then stop at that, so that we don't have to have this boring bit. But anyway, so delighted that everybody has joined today. Just to have as a disclaimer, I know what I'm going to say, and I assure you similar material is available if you go to YouTube. And so what the real advantage is the chance that we have to discuss here. So please do ask questions. I've got the Q&A open here, and hopefully it'll be refreshed as I speak. But Tim, if I missed something, maybe just give me a shout, and let's talk about what the people on this call want to talk about, because that's where the value can be. As Tim has already stated, my undergraduate and my PhD are both in chemical engineering. Small but embarrassing secret, all of my worst marks are in chemistry. And so it's really exciting for me to get to talk to an audience like this who really knows their chemistry. So where you have to, if and when you're asking questions or participating in some way, my chemistry is actually quite weak, but I know enough chemistry to know that my chemistry is weak. I could watch people who are very smart do really good chemistry, and when people who know their chemistry are good at chemistry, it's beautiful to watch. So I've got a lot to learn about chemistry. Please ask tons of questions, or rather, I don't know a huge amount, but please ask questions, and also leave comments about sort of either connections that maybe you thought I missed or connections that should be made. So yeah, not a great chemist, but somebody who really appreciates good chemistry. At Imperial, this whole I like chemistry, even though I'm not great at it, has gotten me to a computer science department where I spend a lot of time collaborating with chemists who are very good at what they do at BASF. This is, of course, a very large chemicals company, and I specifically collaborate with their corporate R&D team. And so this is in kind of trying to design new reaction kinetics or new molecules. And this has been a long collaboration for me, and I really, really like this collaboration. Just to speak a little bit more about this collaboration before I move on, my collaborators at BASF have done something that I find really forward-thinking, and they got together with people who are in pharma. This is Boehringer Ingelheim, and they got together with Evonik, so 3 big German companies, and they said, you know what? We all have the same design of experiments problems. We all have the same challenges, and we wish that researchers would look at the same sort of experimental design and Bayesian optimization problems. So this is a quick shout out to their work. To please go ahead and go on to their GitHub. It's github.com experimental design /Bowfire. And what they are doing is that they are saying, okay, we'd like to use these technologies that the academics are developing, and indeed, everything that my team has developed is in this code, or everything that my team has developed that is in line with what I'm presenting today. But we really need something where we can then take it up into industry. So if this kind of fits with your vision of where things should go, please go ahead and check this out. I think this is super great and a nice way for industry and academia to collaborate. Okay, for the first bit of my talk, I will focus on sort of the ideas surrounding sort of Bayesian optimization and design of experiments. And then I will only in the second half or so move into applications that I work on with BASF. What my assumption is, and again, please do feel free to correct me by writing into the chat or into the Q&A. My assumption is that I'm talking to people who really know their chemistry, but have seen less in terms of what is the field that machine learners are now calling active learning. So basically, Bayesian optimization style techniques. Additionally, what I will do is I will shy away from really presenting I will shy away from presenting the mathematics. So there are no equations on my slide. There's a lot of mathematics that goes into this work. If you want the mathematics at the end, I'm going to put into the chat the YouTube videos you should go see, because my group makes YouTube videos for every research paper that we do. The YouTube videos that you should go see, or the papers you should go read if I didn't make this mathematical one for your interests. Okay, with all those disclaimers, moving on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a number of different examples to think about how we already use data to make good decisions. So with BASF, what I do and what I think about a lot is how to choose the next chemistry experiment, sort of how to decide what is the next experiment to set up so that we understand what's going on in this reaction, or what's going on in this flow setup, or whatever. But of course, in our own everyday life, one of the ways that I might use a very similar set of techniques is that I might be adapting recipes, for instance, from my friends' feedback. And so when I think about examples like this, I'm almost thinking about chemistry the way I think about cooking, right? Where, you know, I've got these things that I mix together and I want to do the best thing possible. I'm a big cycler. If you're annoyed at a cyclist in London, it might be me. Basically, you know, another thing that we might think about when using data to make good decisions would be whether or not I'm going to drive or cycle based on travel time. Is that maybe my cycle takes slightly longer, but I get some nice exercise in there. So definitely, I use data to make good decisions all the time. And really, what some of the sort of key breakthroughs in machine learning have done in the last 10 years is to really just take the way I might make decisions from data and make this into a more sort of very specific setup that comes with my knowledge of statistical machine learning. So two of the key breakthroughs that I'm going to be talking about, and without mathematics, there's a lot of mathematics, and happy to push you on to some of that if that's interesting. One is I'm going to be talking about this tool called Gaussian processes. This is a tool from statistics. And basically what it is that when I do some sort of regression, I capture what is my belief about a system. I say something like, okay, I think that with this trend line, I spend more money and the quality of something or other improves or something like this. What I really like about Gaussian processes is that they don't just give me my belief, they also give me some sort of understanding of my uncertainty surrounding my belief. And this can be really useful in a design of experiments context because I don't just have the regions of the search space where maybe, I think it's going to be useful to query in here. I also have the regions of the search space that I don't really understand much. Bayesian optimization is a global optimization algorithm. It's provably global, so that it's such that if I keep sampling, I will eventually hit the absolute best solution. And it uses this idea of the underlying assumption is that we have an expensive function to evaluate. So basically, there's a lot of fields of optimization, and I'm awfully interested in quite a number of them. But the specific assumption I will make in Bayesian optimization is that getting any piece of data is difficult. And by that, I mean, it might take the chemists at BASF kind of a long time to set up an experiment. Or setting up an experiment might require some, access to a pilot plant that, maybe I'm allowed to use it, maybe I'm not, or maybe it's expensive. Okay. So these are the sort of buzzwords that I'll be using today that are sort of maybe the ones that are drawn from machine learning. Okay, so I've got all these ideas, and my goal is to think about developing an automated framework for optimal decision making. So I feel like no machine learning / AI presentation is complete without a human robot picture. So here you go, tick, that's done. But another thing that I think happens often in machine learning presentations is that maybe we sometimes forget that the technology we're presenting is actually pretty old and it's been around for a while. In the case of Bayesian optimization and Gaussian processes, where the first reference that I know of is from 1951. And this was in an MSc thesis, which is extraordinary. I can't believe this was an MSc thesis in South Africa, 1951. And what this guy Krieg was thinking about is he was a geologist. And he was thinking about drilling oil wells. And what happens is you have some plain, you think that oil is somewhere, and you need to choose where you're going to drill next to see if you're going to be getting oil. So you can drill here, you can drill here, you can drill here. Each drilling activity is really difficult. And so what you wish to do is you wish to have some sort of algorithm that will choose for you the next place to drill that will somehow take advantage of the information you already have. And so I think, there's been a ton of research, in the last 70 plus years at this point, especially in the last 10 or so. However, this is material that has been around for a while. Okay. Some ways that these same ideas are used in robotics would be something like when I wish to set up a robot and I wish to observe it walking. Maybe I want to develop my robot so that it walks as far as possible, but I need to tune the various knobs on the robot and have different settings on the robot to see how far it walks based on whatever setup I have. However, every experiment I do is going to be expensive because every time the robot falls over, maybe I'm going to have to do some fixing of the robot, which may or may not be annoying, depending on what happened to the robot in the last fall. And so this sort of Bayesian optimization design of experiments, the way it started showing up the most often in machine learning was to start thinking about expensive to evaluate functions such as those in robotics. we can start thinking about moving this to science experiments. And indeed, this is something that people have been doing for quite some time at this point. And it's, you know, there is lots of beautiful work. I will more focus on the work that we've been doing, but there's an awful lot of stuff going on. So for instance, if we would have this sort of scaffold right here, and we wish to create tissue, for instance, in tissue engineering on a scaffold, we might have some sort of expensive computer simulation that would tell us whether or not tissue would grow on this scaffold nicely. And we might be able, using Bayesian optimization, to optimize some sort of flow rate through the reactor, and or how often we might change the medium to feed the cells that we're growing. Okay, so basically the goal in all of the items that I've discussed so far is to get the optimal outcome. So I might want to get the minimum of one of these crazy functions. Now that's in general the goal of anything in optimization, right? Is I either wish to get the very best, or I wish to get the very best or the least expensive or something like this. But the underlying assumptions in this particular application are quite specific. So what the applications have in common, and where this could be useful for chemistry, so this is key, is that acquiring new data would be expensive, but we would have limited other knowledge. And let me explain that a bit more. In chemistry, we often know things. Like if I know this is a first order reaction and we have A going to B, do not use these methods, right? Because what's going on here is that if I know it's a first order reaction and I know A goes to B and I'm just trying to fit some sort of rate constant or something like this, I know that ODE, I know that ordinary differential equation. All I need to do is I need to find the parameters. You can do a lot better with traditional parameter fitting to get the right answers, right? So don't use it for that. If acquiring new data is not expensive, then the techniques that I'm going to be talking about, or that I am talking about, have been talking about, are too much sort of trying to crack a nut with a hammer. There are other techniques. If acquiring new data is inexpensive, then I might want to use things like derivatives or gradients in my optimization algorithm to suggest which way to go. So for instance, in what is common about all of these applications and about the applications that I'm looking at with BASF is that each individual experiment that needs to be run is quite expensive. And you can't just run instantly 2 experiments right side by side to know where some sort of slope is, to say, okay, well, best is, you know, getting lowest cost, and so we'll go downhill to go get lowest cost or something like that. Because we have so few experiments that we can run, it is rather that what we're interested in is having to have data points that we sample that are far away from one another, just so that we actually make sure that we more or less fill the space. And then this limited other knowledge is that, well, if you know it's a first order reaction, then you know what components go to what components, you're not going to need a technique like this. Okay, so what, you know, I've said all sorts of things about what I'm not doing. What kind of things can we do? The geology example is a prime example, because there it's quite expensive to drill. A single drilling operation is going to be very expensive into the middle of the earth. And we don't actually know what's going on with the rocks in the middle of the earth. Maybe a geologist can say, well, if you've got this pattern for a while, you know, here, it's kind of probably going to be similar other places, but you don't really know. Like, it's not, you don't have some nice A goes to B equation. The other example that I gave with the robot, well, it's difficult to set up the robot, so that's expensive. And maybe for this particular example, we don't have some sort of physics-based understanding for how the robot operates. With the tissue engineering example, it was an expensive simulation. It takes a while to run this CFD simulation, and the tissue behavior itself is unknown. I mentioned that, of course, we use data to make decisions in many areas of our life, but just to sort of emphasize, at least with the algorithms I'm talking about today, they really should only be used when acquiring new data is expensive and we have limited other knowledge. That would mean, for instance, that this example about my cycle route would not be the kind of problem where I would address the techniques that I'm talking about. And the reason would be that, for instance, if I know the roads to my destination, I'm going to use the fact that I know the roads to my destination to figure out what my optimal route should be. Whereas with the examples that are up above, I don't really have this same amount of information. I just know that I'm searching within some sort of space. Okay, so basically what these techniques do and what they don't. So when is an application successful? First off, just to mention dimensionality. These kind of surrogates where, I want to optimize, so I want to say maximize yield or minimize cost or maximize selectivity or something like this. All of these experiments, they're going to work for relatively few input dimensions, where, the examples that I gave with geology, there's only 2 input dimensions. I choose where on the Earth I'm going to drill, right? And if I'm in And then on the robot, there's relatively few knobs I can turn. In the tissue engineering example, I'm changing flow rate and I'm changing the composition of the feeding material. In the BASF examples that we often work with, I can change input parameters, I can change temperature. In a flow reactor, I might be able to change flow rate. So there's these things I can change, but it's not something where I have a huge search space where I'm doing something like, making a lot of choices on a supply chain or something like this. So these surrogates work for a relatively few number of dimensions. Any sort of Bayesian optimization or active learning researcher who's on the call is probably shaking with rage at this point, because basically the truth is that people who sort of research these topics are very much trying to go to a higher number of dimensions. So there's a lot of really lovely active research that's thinking about, hey, we can beat this, this rule that I gave about fewer than 10 dimensions. So that it's definitely not a hard and fast rule, and people have found some ways around it. But my sort of overarching understanding of most of this research is that what happens is that for people interested in going to a higher number of dimensions, they often end up finding some sort of latent space embedding that is lower dimensional, or they end up finding some smaller problem within the bigger problem. So basically what the point is here is that if I'm taking sort of these Bayesian optimization or active learning strategies off the shelf and expecting to just use them, then 10 or fewer dimensions and we're fine. More dimensions and it starts having asterisks with respect to what we can do, and it's certainly really interesting to look into. Okay. All right, another things about what makes an application successful. I already said that we most find Bayesian optimization and sort of active learning techniques useful when we know less about the underlying system. If we really understand the underlying system, probably we want to do parameter estimation and figure out what the parameters on an ordinary differential equation are. But there are still areas within this field where people try to think about sort of how they can tune things to recapitulate the underlying function. So as a small example, basically what happens is that I have some sort of guess about where the oil fields are under the earth. and I wish to decide where to drill, there's some underlying function that I have that's basically going to say, here's where I'm going to get good stuff or something like this. And so if I have a machine learning model or a data-driven model that is going to somehow recapitulate the underlying function in a nice sort of way, that is, of course, going to be an advantage. Then I gave the example of this robot. Some of the parameters I might be able to tune with the robot, they might be sort of knobs, and knobs are sort of continuous. Others might be switches, sort of a decision yes or no. And whether or not I'm allowed to tune parameters that are continuous or yes, no, this is categorical, that will change sort of what my underlying surrogate model will be. And then the other thing that people often ask themselves is they'll ask themselves about these periodic function aspects. So for instance, I'm giving in the picture the example of waves. Okay, I'm going to skip this because I'm going slower than normal. And a commonly used surrogate model, or at least one that I like, are Gaussian processes. This is an extension of a normal distribution to an infinite number of dimensions. I really like how it has really nice uncertainty properties, and I like the sort of proofs that people work with related to Gaussian processes. They do have some numerical difficulties sometimes, which can be frustrating. And then there's also a whole lot of other of these surrogate models. So with respect to our collaboration with BASF, of course, a lot of the time what BASF is going to have to deal with is data that is somehow categorical. They're going to have to choose which solvent to use, for instance, or they'll have to choose, you know, for some catalyst pellet, which of several standard shapes to use or something like this. And this is badly modeled by these continuous models. So what the BASF collaborators like to do is they like to have tree-based models and make sort of branched decisions. So basically, well, you know, I either have my first solvent or my second solvent. And that's kind of nice because now I can take these categorical variables that aren't continuous, like choosing which solvent, for instance. The downside is that we don't have embedded uncertainty estimates. So I have a little picture here showing how I might have uncertainty based on distance that may or may not be useful depending on the particular application. Okay. There's lots of others of these surrogates. A lot of them are very common. There are stochastic processes, there are regression functions. There's a ton of research into people thinking about what is good when, and it's a fun area to get to be in as a researcher. Okay. Just as an example as to how some of these algorithms work, let's say that I wish to recapitulate this function. So maybe my input here, so the x-axis would be something like a temperature, and my output would be yield. I know that this is not a reasonable function for that, but you know, basically this is just a wiggly line. But what I want to be showing here is just how the algorithms work. And then once we've shown how the algorithms work, I want to show you the particular ways that we're collaborating with BASF. So I have some sort of input that I get to choose. And then we get some output, and I wish to measure the output. So maybe I wish to minimize the function. The red line is the mean of the function, and the shaded region is some sort of uncertainty metric. Basically, I don't quite know what is going to be coming out. This is a common assumption in Bayesian optimization and definitely useful in chemistry, where I may or may not be able to have a lot of accuracy or precision in my measurements. Okay. But I'm not gifted with this magical function. I only have a few points of observation. So I do not have the red line or the red shaded region. I only have the red dots. What these surrogate models will do is that they will come along and they will estimate a mean function. So here that is the blue dotted line. My blue dotted line is, in this case, matching the function at the red points. That is a specific choice. It wouldn't necessarily have to do that. And then on the blue shaded region is telling me where I am uncertain. In this particular model, the underlying surrogate that I used, and this is just an example from scikit-learn, so I just rigged up an example in there. This is just a Gaussian process with an RBF kernel. And the only thing that's happening is that where we have the measurement, there we're a bit more certain, where we say, okay, you know, that seems like something we understand now. And as we get away from the measurement, we are less certain. And so what's going on here, and what I like so much, is that this is a model, a data-driven model, that is telling me, one, what I think I know, and two, giving me some evidence about what maybe I know less about. So just to sort of recap, and the red dotted line is what I wish I knew. The red dots is what I actually have, and the blue is my current mean function and my thoughts on the uncertainty. So I mean, it's pretty good for the few number of data points I have. But the question is, how do we now use this? Let's say I wanted to minimize this particular function. Well, maybe, on slide 20, is my dotted line similar, which is my slide 20, to a Bezier fit? I'm embarrassed to say I don't know what a Bezier fit is. It's a curve fitting. Bezier fit looks like it's a curve fitting thing, but I think it has no uncertainty, right? Oh, but you're asking about the dotted line. Yes, then the answer would be yes. Thank you. Thank you. And more questions always welcome. And I will probably handle them badly again and say, hey, I don't even know what that word is. Okay. Okay, where were we? So I wish to minimize this particular function. Here, maybe my answer is right here. That would be an entirely exploitative type answer. Or maybe it's where I have not explored yet, and it's just that I need to do more exploration other places. The way that people in this field handle things is using what is called an acquisition function. So this is now putting the red on top is the function I wish I knew, and I wish I was minimizing. The blue is my current belief, and then the green is the new thing that I'm now talking about. In Bayesian optimization, we call this an acquisition function. And what an acquisition function does is it combines my knowledge of what's there together with my sort of not knowing what else is there. And it tells me where I wish to take my next sample point. So basically what's happening here, and you can see that I've slightly changed the function from the previous slide to this slide. There's fewer points just so that I could get a better example. My first sort of guess is, well, if I combine my uncertainty with my sort of my belief about the function, probably I had better sample here. And this particular acquisition function that I am illustrating is what is called upper confidence bound, where I am basically making a linear combination of the expected value and how uncertain I am. There are a lot of really interesting techniques for developing lots of different acquisition functions, and there's a lot of beautiful work on that in the literature. So this is one example, but there are many. Okay, so maybe I sample here first. Then what happens is I take that sample and I update my blue function. So I update my belief about what is going on, both with respect to the mean function and with respect to the uncertainty. Take that point. Now I'm recomputing the acquisition function because I am now much more certain about the region where I just took a measurement. Now the acquisition function is saying, okay, sample where you really don't know anything. So, okay, I'm going to sample where I don't know anything. And that will improve my knowledge of the function further. And I will continue. So basically what happens is that my acquisition function sensed where to sample next. Then I do the sampling. Then I update my belief about what the underlying function is, et cetera, et cetera. What's nifty about Bayesian optimization and I find useful is that it's not just space filling. It is actually deciding it is deciding where to sample based on whatever it is my underlying goals are. So basically, there are two areas in active learning that are sort of separate, but sort of somehow complementary. The one that I have been using more often with BASF is this Bayesian optimization, where we have goals. We wish to maximize yield. We wish to maximize selectivity. We wish to minimize cost. We need to think about these sorts of things. There's another area that's called Bayesian quadrature, which is more about sort of space filling, trying to figure out what is happening in the entire space. Maybe I need to characterize a wide space rather than having a particular objective. Okay. One thing just to mention in passing, and this is just how these algorithms go. So just to kind of give a rough idea of how they go. This algorithm is guaranteed to converge, but it's guaranteed to converge in the sense that you never stop evaluating. And, sometime between now and infinity, it will have found the global solution. There are lots of people who are thinking, and there is interesting research in specific cases about when you can be more specific and say, I can stop now. And I have a good enough answer, or I have a provably good enough answer. But the sort of plain vanilla case is that you need to sample until forever. However, my computational experiments, or my computational experience, and this is similar to the experience that I see in every paper, so I really don't think it's just me, is that for whatever method you have, basically you have these diminishing returns where, maybe there was this very best answer that you never found, but basically this 0 to 300, maybe you don't have 300 experiments you can do in some applications, but in this particular application, we were looking at maybe up to 300 experiments. We're just running into sort of flatlining at a certain point. And that is at least my experience with these algorithms. Okay, so chemistry and cooking. Not good at chemistry, not good at cooking. But basically, one of my favorite papers is out of Google Brain, and it's called Bayesian Optimization for a Better Dessert. And basically what happened is that they varied the ingredients and they varied the ranges of the ingredients, and they asked human testers to compare control cookies. And so basically, this is how I roughly think about Bayesian optimization and chemistry, which shows how little chemistry I know. Okay, but maybe some examples that are less silly and more optimization and more chemistry-ish. There are some really smart chemists at Imperial. I'm using an example that was developed by a PhD student by the name of Lyndon Trucker, but there are other, really nice works in both the chemistry department and the chemical engineering department here at Imperial, where basically you might have something like a self-optimizing, you want it to be self-optimizing microreactor system. Here in the system of Lyndon, you are able to control flow rate. You're able to control kind of which components go in. So you're able to decide the settings on your pumps and what you put in to the pump. And you're able to control temperature. Then you're quantifying whatever is going on in your output. People have been thinking about this type of application since approximately 2010. And there's lots of ongoing work, both in industry and in academia on these types of systems. There's tons of amazing work you can do on sort of setting up these systems, setting them up really in a nice sort of way. That's some of the stuff that Lyndon did during his PhD. What I like to think about as somebody who's interested in data-driven optimization is I like to think about what's going on from an optimization point of view. So in this particular case, I've illustrated a droplet microfluidic system. This could also be like a plug flow where, each experiment is not inside of a single drop, but, you have some bit of the plug and then you've got an experiment in that. And what's super cool for me on something like this, and this is something that we've been thinking about with the BASF team a lot, is that if you've got some sort of microreactor system, well, then you basically have a lot of experiments that are happening 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like right in a row, but you've got all sorts of really cool mathematical properties that make this difficult. So for one, I get to choose some sort of input chemical composition. I get to choose temperature. I get to choose flow rate. I know that when I say I get to choose temperature, it's actually just that I get to control the heating, but it's close enough that it's more or less like I get to control temperature. And then I have measurements I can take. There are some measurements that are going to come back quickly. This would be something like fluorescence measurements or something from microscopy or using an infrared camera. And then there's some measurements that are going to come back more slowly. Like for instance, in one of the applications we've been considering with BASF, there is an HPLC high performance liquid chromatography unit that's attached, but that particular unit at least is going to take an hour to return its answers. So for me, somebody who's interested in active learning and Bayesian optimization, this is a really like a delicious challenge because we have all sorts of really fun techniques that we have to start thinking about. So first off, there's this asynchronous batch aspect. Basically, if I have not had my experiments 1 or 2 already measured and quantified by the HPLC, well, I'm making my decision about my experiment N not knowing all of the information yet. So basically there's this time value of information where I might be having to make my next choices without having full information about what's going on. I've also got this multi-fidelity aspect. Sometimes we can do easier experiments or get some experimental data. So for instance, I could get some fluorescence data. In another one of the things that we're looking at, I might be able to get a UV vis spectra that may or may not be reliable. But I might not be able to get my HPLC data at the same time. I've got this path-based control aspect where I'm allowed to change flow rate, but if I change the flow rate of droplet N, then I'm actually changing the flow rate of everything else that's in the system as well, right? Because all of a sudden it's pushing forward faster. I've got mixed features. This is really interesting in machine learning, and it's basically that I get to choose what ingredients I'm going to put in and also what are their various levels. I've got hierarchical decisions, so I might decide not to do a more expensive experiment if a cheaper experiment was failed. And I've got input constraints, for instance, all of the chemical species are going to have to add to one. So all sorts of super fun things. And one of the things that we have thought about with BASF is combining two of these aspects in particular, asynchronous batch and path-based control. And what's going on is that you might have noticed that in the Bayesian optimization / design of experiments examples I was giving beforehand, what happens in Bayesian optimization is that we always assume that we're able to sample the space wherever we wish at any one time. So basically, we hop around the space and we can always take the next sample wherever we wish. This is, of course, not going to be the case in many chemistry applications. In many chemistry applications, for instance, changing the temperature is going to be something that might take a while, right? Is that if I have a big system, it might take a while to get to some kind of equilibrium. And I might not want to have one experiment that requires things to be very warm and one experiment that requires things to be very cold and then go back and forth. So one thing with my microfluidic example is that I might want to make sure that I'm following some sort of path-based optimization method. And actually what we are able to do with that is, of course, heating and cooling, I learned in chemical engineering school, is they're different from one another, right? Is that to heat a system is a lot easier and I can do it a lot faster than I can cool a system, right? And so actually what our Bayesian optimization algorithm has to take into account is the expensiveness of heating is different than the expensiveness of cooling, which I find very fun. Another thing that our Bayesian optimization algorithm can take into account is that some variables are more easy to change than others. So for instance, in my microfluidic example, I might be able to change the relative concentration of two things more quickly than I can change a flow rate or something like this, and hope for quasi-steady state. Okay. Now, we also have been thinking about other applications with BASF. And here, what I'm going to be thinking about is an application that we thought about in battery research. And here, what's going on is that BASF would like to make these pouch batteries, but it's awfully cheap to make coin cell batteries. So these pouch cell batteries are what they actually want to sell. The coin cell batteries, much easier to make, much easier to do experiments on. So the thing is I can do a lot more of my experiments characterizing what is going on with these coin cell batteries than I can with these pouch cell batteries. What we're going to end up doing is that to understand this, what the previous literature said is basically, why don't we construct a data-driven model in red for the high fidelity? That would be the pouch cell. That would be the pouch battery, where the one that I want to make. And in blue, I can construct my data-driven model for my low fidelity example. And then what I can do is I can somehow combine my belief about these two systems and that acquisition function where I am told where to sample, I can somehow, where it figures out where to sample next, it can somehow combine my two pieces of knowledge. So this was the prior work before we were working with BASF. And then with BASF, one of the things that we've been doing is developing an engineering contribution where we give lots of different options for how to combine the different fidelities. And basically what the point of this is that even similar to Bayesian optimization, where I'm never quite sure, unless I understand the application a bit better, how to sort of combine methods, we might not be in a situation where we can use the very particular method that was developed in the very particular paper. And so basically what we did, and now have available in Bullfire, is these different options for combining fidelities in a different sort of way. And so, just thinking about it from a a machine learning point of view, I can combine things based on variance. I can combine things based on information, and I mean in an information theory sort of way. And this will decide how much I'm going to sample my high versus my low fidelity. Okay, so this is an ongoing sort of set of challenges that we get to look at with our BASF collaborators. This is certainly really interesting. I'm happy to take more questions about this. We have a code Entmoot that does a lot of this. This is open source, and it connects with a lot of the stuff at BASF. And just to close, what I want to mention is this Bowfire tool that my BASF collaborators have developed as a way for industry and academia to sort of intersect and to start sort of making sure that people are developing the kind of methods that are needed in industry in this particular area. So thanks a lot for listening today, and happy to take any further questions.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ruth. We had a question in the middle.
Which I think I've answered.
Yeah. Has anyone got a question that I'd like to put? I mean, one thing I wondered, I mean, I know very little about AI in general, but about things like I guess what you're trying to do, what you're doing here is guiding experiments, like say if the Lee Cronin computer, I mean, he has that programming language. I mean, if you had an AI on top of it, could it direct and optimize? I think he already does, to be honest, but
yeah, so I mean, Bayesian optimization is common in a lot of chemistry applications, right?
Yeah.
I personally would not want everything automated.
Yeah.
At least my collaborators at BASF would not. And basically, I think the reason is that we, again, I'm someone who's not great at chemistry, but I know that there are people who are. And so at least at BASF, what you're going to see is people wanting to really, yeah, sure, we take the advice from the algorithms, but also we are very much involved with it. So yeah.
Yeah, keep a human in the loop. Yeah, there's questions coming in here.
So yeah, so thanks everybody for the questions. I'll get to as many as possible, and then let's see. So comparing to DOE, okay, great. So basically, as Alex very clearly knows, traditional design of experiments is a set of statistical techniques that will indeed sample the space. What your goal in these DOE techniques is to typically maximize the information, something like the Fisher information matrix, right? Now, that's nice to have. What's going to happen in Bayesian optimization and the way that it's going to be different, whether or not it's useful is for you, Alex, to decide for your particular application. The way that it's going to be different is that I'm going to be optimizing for a goal. I'm going to be optimizing for something like I want to maximize yield. And so what's going to happen is that rather than having my objective be this statistical quantity, it's going to be maximizing yield or something like that. How robust is Bayesian optimization to noise in the experimental data? That's actually a really good point of Bayesian optimization. My picture didn't do a great job of illustrating that, but basically output noise, where you're not quite sure about whether your experiment was, really giving you the answer, or if there is the answer. Bayesian optimization is brilliant. What's a little bit more difficult with Bayesian optimization is input noise. So for instance, if you're not quite sure about your controller, but there's been some really beautiful work in recent years on robust optimization and Bayesian optimization. So people really have been thinking about that, and it's starting to appear. I have a reasonable amount of screening data based on rate F reaction substrate enzyme type. Where do I start putting this into a model? Cool. I guess my first questions would be, what do you already have? Do you already know if you, because it sounds like from this, there might already be the knowledge of what the reaction is. If you're just fitting in ODE, I would not use this technique as much as I love this technique. If you're thinking about if you're thinking about input output, then I would start wondering if you could already either go, Bowfire is built on Bowtorch. That is the sort of the most typical Gaussian process tool. If you can get it into something like that, that'd be cool. But then it says reaction substrate enzyme type, so it might be that something is categorical. Basically, this sounds like a super cool problem. Sorry, would have to know more. How does Bayesian optimization deal with non-normal distributions? Yep. So my data has errors. So you're right that there is this approximation of an underlying normal somehow. But that is the assumption of the Gaussian process. That is not the assumption of Bayesian optimization. So if you choose your probabilistic model correctly, you should be fine. Could the continuous Gaussian surrogate model be used for mixed integer? Gaussian process surrogates are used for mixed integer, and people do this. I don't love that technique. I'm actually obsessed with it in my research. So the techniques that I like are ones that we developed, which is that basically what we do is we use a tree kernel for the Gaussian process. So we basically say, well, I don't want this underlying continuity. I want what's called a tree kernel. I really like that. How is Bowfire? Oh, great question. Bowfire different from a tool like Axe? Yes. So this person knows. Okay, so Bowtorch is made by Meta, and then Meta also makes Axe, which is active experimentation or something like this. And it is similar in goal to Bowfire, which is that they are both Bayesian optimization / active learning tools. We're working on this paper right now, so we're actually exactly asking ourselves that question, like, why did we develop a whole new library? We actually think we had a lot of good reasons. Basically, this is a highly configured version of Axe. So you could do anything that you can do in Bowfire. You could also do in Axe, but you would have a day of headache every time you wanted to do something different in Axe that Bowfire will do for you. So basically, at least what my industrial colleagues tell me, and I tend to believe them because they do this all day, every day, is that they need a set of items, things like that example that I gave about you can't change your parameters too fast, that are going to specialize Axe in very particular ways, that it would be easier for them to just go ahead and develop it. Interestingly, the Axe people also have a list of reasons why you shouldn't use Axe, and exactly this kind of stuff that we're doing, where we really want to specialize in this way and that way and that way, is a reason to not use Axe. Axe is a much more, it's a quite generic tool. It's a really nice tool. But ours is more specific to at least the challenges of these 3 companies that have gotten together. Can other companies join this development consortium? Yes, I'm so glad you asked. Please join and go to the Bowfire website, open up like a discussion or issues or something like that. They are trying to get more people on board. And you have multi-objective Bayesian optimization. Yes, this is some brilliant work that has been done in recent years. I didn't present it too much. In particular, Bowfire, which I mentioned, is really focused on multi-objective. Is there also a web app publicly available besides the Python collabs? Not sure what that means. High dimension. Oh, high dimensions. It's just, so high dimensions can be handled. It's just that then you have to do more thinking, and lots of people have done this. You're just looking for a lower dimensional space. You hope it's there. And people have different techniques for this. It's really cool. Available for participants. I hope it will be.
Well, that's a good point to wrap it all up, because it's about 1:30, and I think we're pretty much out of time. But yes, it will be available. It is being recorded, and it will be on the SCI website at some point in the not too distant future. In fact, quite
Great.
soon, I hope.
And just to conclude, I am putting into the chat the technical versions of everything I presented.
Okay, yeah, on the YouTube there. So copy and paste and view at your leisure. Okay, well, thanks very much. Oh, yeah, thanks very much, Ruth, for a great presentation. Oh, let's share that screen. Oop. So thanks for your talk, and thanks very much for all those questions, and thanks for those answers, Ruth. So just to wrap up, if you aren't already a member of SCI, please consider signing up. Look at the options. We'd love to get to know you better. And don't forget that we have our third trilogy on AI in drug discovery in around about a month's time, Wednesday, 24th of April. And that's with John Overington of SCITalk, who will talk about AI in drug discovery. Don't forget to register. And thanks again. Thanks to Ruth, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.